If you thought the live-action Mario movie was rock bottom in terms of video game movies, then the one I'm reviewing today is even worse. Double Dragon was a beat-em-up series by Technos Japan before moving on to other developers like WayForward Technologies and Arc System Works. The first game was made for the arcade in 1987 as a spiritual successor to games like Renegade. It's about twin brothers Billy and Jimmy Lee fighting the Shadow Warriors gang, who opened the game by kidnapping Billy's girlfriend Marion. The game was immensely popular back in the day, hence it was ported to multiple systems like the NES, Master System, and even Game Boy. A few sequels followed, and there was even a crossover with Battletoads, not to mention a few American comics and an animated TV series. The movie we're looking at today was released in 1994, and it tries to do its own thing when it comes to the Double Dragon lore. If you scroll around the internet, you could find some people who worked on this movie and went on to do better things like Peter Gold, Paul Dini, and Neil Shusterman. The same can't be said for Michael Davis, who worked on a highly panned kids film named Prehysteria, which somehow had sequels. Not much to say about director James Yukich though, as he's mostly done music videos and some other minor things. The reason why this movie is even worse than the Mario movie comes down to memorability. While Super Mario Bros. Did a major tonal shift from lighthearted to dreary, there was still something worthwhile coming out of that. Double Dragon, on the other hand? Well, as we embrace our inner dragon, let me show you what makes this one a real dud. We open with exposition from 1,000 years ago, when the evil Shadow Warriors were trying to take over China. They were only stopped by the Emperor, who created an ancient medallion that could control the body and soul. And this story was known as the Legend of the Double Dragon. For those who don't know, the Double Dragon title is meant as a homage to Bruce Lee and his film Enter the Dragon. It's also fitting since the arcade game can have 2 players. Honestly, I don't mind the movie wanting to introduce some mysticism or some fantastical backstory. Hell, the scene of the Shadow Warriors decimating this village of monks is honestly pretty good as far as action and tone go. We see one of the warriors follow a monk into this cave and finds one half of the medallion. Now it's the year 2007, and a massive earthquake did a number on Southern California and caused the federal government to collapse. Like, I get how important California can be in terms of economy and population, but the rest of the world seems fine. Regardless, Los Angeles is now named New Angeles, and it's now a place straight out of a post-apocalyptic story. Now sure, the original game was inspired by Mad Max and Fist of the North Star, but the use of that setting in this movie is only surface level. For now though, let's meet our main antagonist, Koga Shuko, played by Robert Patrick. He was originally known as Victor Geisman, which would have made more sense since this is a white guy using an Asian name.
7 years ago, the quake was a trumpet's blow heralding my arrival. Over the centuries, many lives have been spent searching for the legendary Double Dragon. Now, it's mine.
I mean, I'm sure they already knew this, but we sure as hell don't. He's disappointed to learn that only one half of the medallion was found, so he whips out some bad CGI magic and says,
"Find me the other half now."
And that half is in the possession of Satori Imada, played by Julia Nixon. She's the adoptive mother of our 2 main characters, Billy and Jimmy, played by Scott Wolf and Mark Dacascos, respectively. If those names sound familiar, it's because Wolf was in some episodes of Saved by the Bell, while Dacascos went on to play Zero in John Wick 3. Anyway, the brothers are in a martial arts tournament where they show off their skills and competitive nature.
Save some for me.
In a minute.
Billy, you're tagged, bro.
Now, having a brotherly rivalry is alright, and the action is quite good. But here's where you get the sense that the humor isn't going to be done well. Sure, he's a teenager and he's gonna goof off a little, but...
Better luck next time, losers.
I mean, humor has its place in a post-apocalyptic story, but it doesn't tend to consist of juvenile behavior to everyone and everything. So the brothers lose, and Billy and Jimmy beat up on the tournament winners, which starts a brawl. Then we get something akin to the future commercial and news programs, kind of like from RoboCop. Here, Vanna White from Wheel of Fortune is a news anchor. Strange.
I always get them mixed up, whether to go forward or backward.
It's funny? This is also when we see the police force of New Angeles, led by Chief Delario, played by Leon Russom. He has his hands full given how gangs essentially run the city, but only at night. But unlike the gangs from Warriors, which are unique amongst themselves, we have...
It's the Mohawks. Moby Dick over there is Bo a Boba.
Okay, I'm not going to comment on every futuristic thing this movie does, but this just seems dumb. Why is it programmed to have him laugh like that? I just can't think of these guys as a threat. And yes, that is a Bobo. In the original game, he was a big and bald muscle guy. Not so much here, though.
Steroid freak. Says he can bench press 800 pounds.
Bull crap! Anyway, a Bobo won't let them go unless they pay $50. They then decide to take Satori's medallion instead, but...
Drive!
Okay, she's kinda cool in my opinion. This leads to a car chase, and I guess they use combustible fuel in this timeline, and all the vehicles have those illegal identification devices.
It's the Lee brothers. Ugg and home.
Oh, I get it. Ugly.
You know, I don't think he was this stupid in the games. The longer this chase goes on, the more apparent that a lot of the future tech feels unnecessary. Like, you don't need a tracking device if you just remove the map covering your windshield. Our heroes get trapped in a narrow alleyway, and the bad guys think they can go in after them. However... am I doing this right? You'd think there would be a fight scene here, but no. Right before anything can happen, some mysterious people begin showing up to scare away the bad guys. Turns out this is the Power Corps, led by this film's version of Marion, played by Alyssa Milano. I guess this movie retooled her to make her not a damsel in distress like in the games, but her banner with our heroes isn't very promising.
Team Lee. Need any help?
We don't need your help, Marion.
Always the tough guy, huh, Jimmy? You're not worth saving.
She then takes the device left behind by the baddies to learn about the gangs. At least she seems competent. She offers the boys a place to lie low, but they rather go home. Once they do, Satori talks more about the Dragon Medallion and how their father was involved in finding it.
He said the mystical powers of the dragon are far too dangerous for one person to possess. When he died, I made a promise to myself that I'd look after you two and the medallion.
Fair enough. Again, this movie is going in its own direction, but now it has to tell its story well, and it doesn't. Satori says that she split the medallion in two and hid the other piece elsewhere. Their half enhances the body, while the other half does the same for the soul.
Dark forces know of its existence. It's been the source of much death and destruction. It is our responsibility to protect the dragon.
So when the movie isn't being juvenile, it is trying to tell some kind of neat story. I just wish the setting wasn't so jarring. Now here's a nightmare for you. Standing on a glass floor high above the city. No thanks! Also, I can almost see an outline around Abobo's face for where they might have applied the makeup and mohawk. So it's not just bad effect work, but bad makeup too. But don't worry, it'll get worse. Since Abobo failed to get the medallion, he's taken to a lab to be experimented on for more strength. Accompanying him is Koga's henchwoman Linda, played by Christina Wagner.
But I consider you like a son, Abobo. And like a son, I can always have another. However, there's only one double dragon.
Dude, you haven't even gotten in yet. Then, at Chief Delario's home, we learn that he's Marion's father. And then she has a younger brother named Mark, played by Alyssa's real-life brother, Corey Milano. Father and daughter argue about the power core and whether they're the good guys or not.
Dad, if there's one thing that I learned from Mom, it's to fight for what you believe in.
At least the days are safe, Marion. If that's not enough for you, you should try being a cop sometime.
So the cops are afraid to take on the gangs and are bad-mouthing those who do try to fight them. If this is meant to make the police look like the good guys, it's not working. Anyway, the bad guys found where our heroes live.
No one has called me Geisman in many years. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, I have ascended. I've taken a new name, that of the great ancient Japanese warlord. I am Koga Shuko.
Not sure how much of this matters in the grand scheme of things, but at least we're getting something between these two. Naturally, he tries getting Billy's medallion, and a fight ensues. So that's 2 fight scenes in the first 30 minutes of an action movie.
So, divide and conquer? You got it!
Well, don't hold back too much. I mean, I only expected to see people fighting. So far, Satori and Koga have done the most fighting. Jimmy at least gets to use a broom as a weapon, but Billy?
Gum.
Things come to a head when Koga uses his shadow powers to capture Satori, and the boys come face to face with... Oh yeah! What the hell is that? Okay, given the setting of the games, it wouldn't be hard to imagine the existence of mutants, especially when there is one named Mibobo, which is just a palette swap of a Bobo. But this guy, he's like a giant and goofy pimple monster. But the boys are no match for him, and as they try throwing bricks at a Bobo, they hit a gas line. So how are they gonna stop this guy?
Damn me!
All right, nothing but net.
Lame. Turns out Koga has possessed Satori's body. He demands the other half of the medallion for her freedom, or else he'll blow up the theater with gas. Satori manages to free herself though, and helps her adopted sons escape. She buys them time to get out before she... dies! Holy crap! The boys are naturally shaken by this loss, but no time for that. Koga meets with all of New Angeles' street gangs, and among them is this one guy who looks like Casey Jones from TMNT.
But he's spreading the goods around, and if we don't jack in, we'll all be vapor!
Koga shows his power by shadow choking one gang leader to death. Not surprisingly, the other gangs fall in line. As for our heroes, they argue about what to do now that Satori is gone. But they also take time to mourn her, and it's honestly a decent scene. They're then interrupted by the gangs now working for Koga. This could have been a cool segment to do a Warriors thing, but it's treated with about the same grace as the previous fight. Now with 10% more fighting. The hell was that?
Special delivery!
What was the point of that? Now for another chase scene through the flooded Hollywood River. It's pretty fun though, and behind the scenes, the film crew needed to warn bystanders that they were using a ton of gasoline and alcohol for the explosives. and residents still contacted emergency services 210 times over the course of 10 minutes. Anyway, the boys escape, and the gangs respond by intimidating the police who are trying to investigate them. Their 7-year-long truce is over.
Why are you aggravating the gangs?
What are you gonna do about it? They have rights too.
Yeah, maybe the gang members are just misunderstood.
Poorly written political commentary about police and gang violence? Why, I never! Here comes Huey and Lewis with the news. No, really.
Huey, Lewis, any news?
I just want total domination of one major American city! Is that too much to ask for? Is it? Huh?
Can we go back to you being somewhat threatening? Billy wants to see Marion and ask her for help, but Jimmy isn't feeling the same for petty reasons. Meanwhile, at the Power Core base, which looks like a dystopian indoor playground...
Open up. Here comes another airplane.
No more spinach!
I want to quote something from Jim Yukich himself. He said that our characters are like 3 kids, I assume Marion is counted, on an adventure, so we didn't want to make something that kids would be too afraid to see. I'd like to make it in a funnier, lighthearted vein. Yeah, that certainly explains those earlier deaths and the darker imagery that would work better with an older audience. But seriously, this feels like a watered-down story that appeals to parents who don't want to expose their kids to a lot of violence. Kinda like the direction we see in some later TMNT movies. It doesn't help that a lot of the complex themes and moral ambiguity are thrown away from the final product. The games might not have been for an older crowd to begin with, but if you're going to adapt a beat-em-up game set to a Mad Max-esque world, don't hold back the most important aspect of the game, the fighting. Also, let's have more integrity instead of resorting to cheap toilet humor.
I need to get into Shuko's headquarters. What's he got up there? Heat sensors, infrared. Maybe another week of my special spinach diet will help you.
This isn't funny!
At any rate, the boys find an entrance but fall through a trapdoor, leading them to be surrounded by the target audience of the movie, little kids. To be fair, it shows that Marion is trying to help children who lost their parents, but I have a feeling that those kids will be part of a watered-down fight later. Marion offers to help our heroes, especially if they can figure out how their half of the medallion works. They can't, and the moment is ruined by all that teasing from the Power Core. Besides, they want revenge for Satari's death, so it's on. The Power Core attack Koga's minions as a diversion while Marion, Billy, and Jimmy infiltrate the building. They're trying to find the other half of the medallion, but while sneaking around they overhear Koga and Chief Delario. The big bad is actually trying to bribe the police into working for him, but for now, Billy tries stealing the other half of the medallion.
Or what?
You know, they ought to know that at least one person is onto them. But no, they don't even notice Linda going for a weapon and doing this.
Dad, does this mean I'm grounded?
Not the time or the place. Luckily, Chief Delario stops Linda from attacking them. As for the boys... You guys suck! How many quarters do I have to lose just to help you finish this thing? Marion jumps down after them and they end up in the freaky laboratory. After checking all the frozen bodies, Koga possesses one of them with his shadow magic. They defeat his body with a fan, but he just jumps into another body and... Okay, I know this wasn't intentional. This copy came from a YouTube upload, so I guess this was just to get around the copyright. Jimmy stays behind to let the others escape, but is seemingly bear-hugged to death. Chief Delario defeats Linda by shoving a heavy statue on top of her. Then he gets out and tries to rally the police to take back the streets, only to fail. Then we see that Jimmy is alive and learning about how Koga killed his father for the medallion. Marion gives Billy a pep talk before the Power Core base is under attack by the gangs. It's an okay sequence. In the bathroom, a Bobo looks into a mirror and realizes how much of a monster he's become. I almost feel sorry for the guy. Otherwise, Jimmy is back, except he's possessed now, so... Now, this might have been inspired from the first game on NES, which changed the story and made Jimmy the leader of the Shadow Warriors. Having the brothers fight each other could have been interesting given the differences they had throughout the movie. Maybe Jimmy would give in to Koga's demands in exchange for reviving his adoptive mother. But a body snatcher plot is alright too, as long as Billy is fighting to get his brother back. But I can't even savor this mano-a-mano moment when there's the Double Dragon arcade cabinet in the middle of the scene. How does that even make sense within the story? Billy gets his ass handed to him and decides to toss the medallion, except... And what does it actually do? Makes him invulnerable to damage, I guess. Well, if he can't be hurt, Koga can just let Jimmy die by sandbag. We already established that he was immune to damage, so why bother with this? Koga snags the medallion and leaves Jimmy's body, and now he can reunite the two halves together. What kind of dark power arises from this? All that for this? I was kinda expecting him to turn into a dragon after absorbing all that power from the city. Oh sure, their swords can cut through anything, but this isn't exactly that impressive for a final battle. I suppose it could be worse. It could be 3 ninjas. Abobo tells Marion to get the backup generator on since the Shadow Ninjas are weak to light. Then the boys team up and kick the bosses together, which restores power to the city and gives them the two halves of the medallion.
Oh, shit.
You said it.
What?
Destiny has brought together the double dragons. Guard them as I guarded you.
So, when they combine their medallion together, they get gi outfits similar to their game counterparts. And I guess because they're pure of heart, they don't become evil demon creatures. And their use of individual powers is nothing but a one-sided joke.
Why are you hitting yourself? Hey, don't hit yourself. Come on, quit it.
Delario shows up just in time to receive a check signed by a defeated Koga. The big bad is finally arrested, and what will happen to all that money?
Night shift reporting for duty, sir.
You think I'm bad? Where do you meet my lawyers?
So the lesson is, fund the police or else crime will go up? Who writes this stuff? Whatever. The boys agreed to protect the medallion from evil. Marion shows them the restored car, and Abobo completely turns into a good guy. Oh, and whatever happened with Huey and Lewis?
Should have been us.
Screwed up.
I screwed up?
Yeah, you screwed up.
And I screwed up?
Yeah, you schmuck, you did. We'll never work in this town again.
Should have been the dragon double.
I can't swim. How can I find the medallion?
Now we're finished.
It's over. Now what do we do?
This movie is just a major disappointment. Say what you want about the '93 Mario movie, at least it had its own vision of the source material and stuck with it. This movie has everything that should have worked for Double Dragon, yet squanders it. It starts out promising, but quickly devolves into something akin to TMNT 2 or 3. The humor overshadows any meaningful character development and turns threatening enemies into punchlines. The dark tone that complements the dystopian setting is barely used and feels out of place given the intentions of the director. The acting tends to be as bad, and so are the fighting scenes. It's pretty rare for a full-fledged fight to even occur, which means that there are few fights that I actually liked. I can't even get behind the main characters as they don't grow up and are not funny. Their sibling rivalry conflict pales in comparison to the relationship between Leonardo and Raphael in the first TMNT movie. Koga starts out fine as a big bad, only to become a complete joke by the end. And while I can sort of connect with Satori and her struggle to raise a family, she died off too fast for me to feel invested. Needless to say, this movie failed financially and critically. But some plot elements did carry over into Double Dragon on Neo Geo and other gaming platforms. Probably the best thing that could happen, really. A different tone and setting may have worked with a better director, but that's not what we got. It's just bad. No one should have to watch this. Ever. I'm the Media Hunter. Media is my prey, and reviewing them my way.